Shalom, welcome to another episode of Inspiration from Zion. I'm Jonathan Feldstein, and I have the privilege of being your host, coming to you from the Judean mountains here in Israel. I like to refer to it as the original Bible Belt. Inspiration from Zion is a program of the Genesis 123 Foundation, whose mission is to build bridges between Jews and Christians with Israel in ways that are new, unique, and meaningful. I pray that you will find this all of those. Through this program, we're excited to connect you to people and stories in and relating to Israel to give you a window to look through, experiencing aspects of life here that you might not otherwise know about. We want this to be interactive, so please be in touch with us at inspirationfromzion@gmail.com and send along any questions and any comments about any topic anytime. Or you can reach us at genesis123.co or follow and like Inspiration from Zion on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Stay tuned until the end, where we always offer an exciting opportunity, and please feel free to share this with others who you know will also find it of interest. So I have a very hard time believing that I'm old enough, much less that today's guest is old enough to have been my professor in 1986 at Tel Aviv University. I remember many of the lessons very vividly, and it's nice through electronic media to have been able to reconnect after all these years, some years ago, and stay in touch. And especially nice today to invite him, Dr. Josef Olmert, to be our guest on Inspiration from Zion once again, specifically as we talk about what's happening in Syria, what happened in Syria this past week, and what we need to be looking forward to in the coming weeks, months, and as we're on the verge of a new year. Dr. Olmert offers a rare combination of talents. He's a top Middle East scholar, former peace negotiator, much published author and journalist, as well as a seasoned public speaker. Until recently, he was an adjunct professor at University of South Carolina, where he was chosen as a student poll as the best USC professor, along with other recognitions and awards. At the retirement party, guests of honor who spoke in his honor included Governor Henry McMaster and others who issued positive statements in honor of Dr. Olmert. In his long career, Dr. Olmert was director of the government press office in Israel, an advisor to former Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir during the First Gulf War and the International Peace Conference in Madrid. He secured press relations for Israel with the Soviet Union and China, represented the Prime Minister in numerous conferences and appearances across the world in places that today we would be scratching our head because they're not so friendly with us anymore. In his media experiences, he's been writing a column for many years for Israel's largest newspaper, Yediot Ahronot, as well as the Jerusalem Post, and numerous appearances on radio and TV all over the world. He's a regular columnist for the Huffington Post and writes regularly for Time of Israel, Your Middle East, Fair Observer, Newsmax, and many more. Dr. Olmert, this is very important actually. Dr. Olmert was a member of the Israeli delegation for peace talks with Syria in the Madrid Peace Conference in the early 1990s, and he participated in numerous international conferences on the Middle East and maintained good working relationships with Arab and Palestinian diplomats. He's of course fluent in Hebrew, Arabic, and English, and has a command of Russian and French, which all deeply add dimension to his incredible decades of knowledge. In 1999, Dr. Olmert was a policy advisor to former Defense Minister Moshe Aarons, and in this capacity, he participated in official talks with then Secretary of State Albright and Defense Secretary William Cohen, as well as with other counterparts in many other countries. As to Israeli public life, he's played a significant role as director and one of the founding members of the Council of Parliamentary Democracy that spearheaded the successful campaign to repeal direct elections for the prime minister. That's perhaps another topic to get into at some point. Dr. Olmert was also very active in public campaigns to promote and enhance the understanding between Arab and Jewish citizens of Israel. He holds a PhD from the prestigious London School of Economics in Middle East Studies, headed the Syria and Lebanon desks at Tel Aviv University, the Moshe Dayan Center for Middle East and African Studies, where he served on the faculty. He's authored 4 books on the Middle East, as well as numerous articles in important academic journals. Dr. Olmert has taught at Cornell University, York University in Toronto, City College in New York, and American University, in addition to University of South Carolina. As a speaker, Dr. Olmert has a very extensive experience in lecturing in colleges and universities across the United States, Canada, Europe, Oceania, and major Jewish and civic organizations, as well as important business meetings where his assessments about global affairs are valued and sought after. Finally, Dr. Olmert resides in Columbia, South Carolina today with his wife, Diana, and is father to 3 daughters, 2 of whom are in Israel and 1 temporarily in the United States. All of this is to say, we have a great expert. I truly can't think of anyone more qualified to speak about what's going on in Syria and what to look forward to. And I remember 1986 very fondly, and I'm very pleased to have you back with you in front of my class once again. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate, of course, the great work you do in order to promote relations between Jews and Christians. I think it's a very, very, very significant contribution to the state of Israel.
Thank you so much. Tell me, well, we woke up Sunday morning this week in the United States, and we discovered that the 5+ decades of the Assad dictatorship was no longer in existence. Did you ever think in all of your decades, with all of your experience, that we would come on this day, just sort of happen overnight, literally?
Well, the truth is I did. And it's not Monday morning quarterbacking, because in 2019, I published an article that was against conventional wisdom, in which I argued that Assad did not win the civil war in Syria. So yes, I wasn't totally surprised, but of course I was taken aback, by the immediacy of all that and how it happened. That's something that you cannot really predict necessarily. But in retrospect, look, here is what happened in Syria. There are 2 ways to look at it, and one of them would be to look at the overall sense that Syria, like other Arab countries, is basically a failing state, because the entire modern history of Syria was an attempt, if you will, to find out some kind of government or regime or political system that will put together all these different groups, ethnicities, religious groups, and so on, minorities in Syria, and create one nation out of them in a stable political entity. And it failed. All these attempts failed. And what happens now is that they're going to have another experiment in the Islamic regime for the first time in their history. I can tell you now, it will fail. It's just a question of circumstances and time, but that is what is going to happen. They will experience that.
Okay, so I want to get into that, but why would you have said in 2019 or before that? We looked at Bashar Assad, who was perhaps not as ruthless as his father, who ruled from 1970 until his death 3 decades later, and he was tremendously ruthless. Why was that inevitable to fail? Why could they not hold on?
Look, here is the point that many people don't pay attention to. And I need to say it, we in the West, and by the way, including in Israel, we are traumatized, intoxicated, poisoned with media that doesn't tell us the truth about what's happening in large parts of the world. As simple as that. A media that reflects a sense, an opinion, okay, that really believes in political status quo, in what they call stability, in the sense that if something is not dramatically happened in a country, so that's okay, everything is okay, and therefore advocating, appeasing this type of political system. And I'll come back to Assad in a minute about that, and creates the impression that, well, everything is okay. Something big has to happen so that you will believe otherwise. But even then, they don't report to you about that.
Yeah.
So why did I write this article in 2019? Because I looked at the situation in Syria and saw something very simple. The Druze area was not really under control of Assad. The Kurdish area in the north was not under control of Assad. The Turkish enclave in the northwest that became now the launching pad for the attack on Assad was not under his control. In the desert, ISIS was still around, never mind what Americans or other people said that it wasn't. And basically, Assad controlled about 60% of his territory. Syria became the playground of forces in the region, Iran, Turkey, Hezbollah from Lebanon. Israel had to intervene. America, Russia, the pride of Syria, the art of Arabism, as they used to call themselves, the biting art of Arabism, Syria became a failing state. And therefore I said, look, he did not win. He is a nominal titular ruler of half or so of what used to be a proud, strong Arab country. But let me tell you something about that. Coming back to the media. I don't work anymore with the Huffington Post. You said that I was for 8 or 9 years, and I wrote hundreds of articles. In one of them, I said, here are 10 statements from prominent people in the world who met Bashar Assad and were impressed. And I'll tell you a story here, which is very significant. Why they were impressed? Because he speaks English. He was educated in England.
Right.
He's one of us. He's one of us. He's a good guy. He's one of us.
You're saying that's what other people projected. You're not saying that he's one of us, not you and
he's one of us. One of them was a professor who is an expert on Syria. Never mind the name. You understand why. And I mentioned his name in the article. Well, he praised Bashar Assad. So he wrote back to me and said, yes, the quotations you used about me was correct. But I'll tell you why I had to write about him. Because I had a friend who studied with me in the university in America. He was Syrian. He came back to Syria. He became a big guy in the regime. He became a minister.
Yeah.
And he invited me to visit Syria. And I visited Syria. And then he told me, the last appointment of yours will be a public speech in the University of Damascus. But you cannot say a bad word about the boss. Because if you say, I will suffer.
Sure.
So this guy said, I apologize for it. What could I do?
Interesting. Okay.
So why do I tell you all this? Jonathan and our listeners and viewers, we still do not understand a lot of what's happening in the Middle East or in other parts of the world. And a great deal of blame falls on the media and on some of the universities or academic centers that are teaching and researching along the spirit of what I just told you.
Okay. So
and it's a big problem.
It's a big problem, and it's not isolated to the Arab Middle East or Israel, or
Of course.
it's a big problem in general. So in your next career, you can work to fix the problem in university.
You know what? I will not be able to fix it anymore, but I have hopes.
Okay.
That things will change now because the landscape starts to move away from all that, I don't want to get into politics, and definitely not American politics, but I do know of people who tell me, we changed our vote in the elections, whenever it was a few weeks ago, because of what happened in American campuses. All of a sudden it's
okay.
as a lightning that showed us that things are wrong.
Good.
And that's a very interesting point.
That's very important. So let me ask you a question. Is it an oversimplification? If I want to ask you the question, why did it happen now? Why did it happen this week? Is it an oversimplification to say that Iran invested billions and billions of dollars in three failed entities, that inevitably this was going to happen. I don't know that anyone expected that Israel would be as effective, but thank God. And that also, as soon as Russia got tied up with Ukraine now for what, 3 years, 4 years, however long that war is going on, Russia's own resources and protecting of its assets and the billions that it's invested in Syria for decades that preceded the Assad regimes. Is it that an oversimplification as to why it happened now, that they were no longer able to hold up Assad?
It's not over and not simplification. It is interesting. There is a connection. Let me explain to you. Look, take, for example, where it all started now. It was in a province called Idlib, which is northwest Syria on the border with Turkey, which for years was under the control of these rebel groups and basically Turkey. They planned it for a long time. They were waiting for the right time. The right time came now, and I'll come to this in a minute. It didn't occur just like that. They started to rebel and then they moved. They prepared it. They got the arms, the training, the planning, the guidance from the Turks. There's no question about it. They got it from the Turks. Now, the Turks were very clever, sophisticated, whether we like Erdogan or not, and I don't, but he's a dangerous enemy because he's clever. He's not stupid. He waited for his time. Never mind the formal alliance with Iran and all that. He had his own interest. There's no question about it. Sunnis versus Shiites and so on and so forth. Look, the timing was definitely influenced by what happened in Lebanon, because Hezbollah used to be a main pillar of support for Bashar Assad during the civil war, and they were heavily defeated by Israel. Now, Israel was seen at some point in time after October of 2023 to be defeated and weak, and all of a sudden, after a year, it became the opposite,
Right.
The Iranians suffered a huge amount with the Israeli retaliatory attack, which, hey, look, people don't even talk about it. The Israeli Air Force destroyed the entire air defense system of Iran.
Not just in Iran, in Iraq and
Yeah.
all the way up. Correct.
Okay, so the Iranians were weak. And of course, the Russians are all the time weak for the last 2 years or so because of Ukraine and all that. So Erdogan chose the timing that was influenced by all that. Basically, look at the irony. Israel is not the cup of tea of Erdogan, but he capitalized on Israel's success to achieve his success on the expense of other people, which is not against our interest, because everything that weakens the Iranians and their proxies is great for Israel. You understand that? Everybody understands that, But
Wait,
we have to be careful
that's what
about
is that
Turkey.
saying? The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Yeah, but for that matter, you can say it. The Turks are not going to be our friends, and definitely not under Erdogan. So the attack on Assad therefore came at a time which was convenient to them, but it was planned before. The idea came before. By the way, exactly as was the attack of Hamas on Israel. The Hamas attack on Israel, as we know
Wow.
now, was planned for years, was sought for years. And look, here is the point that comes back to what I already told you. We are obsessed in the Western world with the sense of peace and quiet. If something doesn't happen, it means that everything is okay. As opposed to the idea that sometimes things do not happen because they are waiting for them to happen in a convenient time for them, not
For
to
them,
us.
in their
And that's
terms.
exactly what
Yeah.
happened in Syria.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Let's take a very quick break. I want to come back and talk about because honestly, I don't fully understand who's in charge, but let's take a really quick break. Okay, Dr. Olmert. I am having positive flashbacks to our class together in the spring of 1986. Quite a good experience, and I appreciate the teaching now. I've been traveling and doing a lot of media and speaking, and certainly I don't have the experience that you have, but in terms of people asking me, well, who's in control and what does it look like for Israel these days? I want you to answer that, but I want to tell you what I've been answering. that there are still, although I didn't know that Syria, excuse me, that Turkey had been planning this, as you said, and what a great analogy in terms of the same with the Hamas planned attack. But I've been saying that there are many militias, there are many bad actors. There may be one or two good actors in Syria these days, or people who are trying, and it seems to me that they will be continuing to fight each other. And at some point, some of them, even though they don't have so many weapons anymore, because Israel had a very successful attack on most of the remains of the Syrian military. At some point, they may choose to attack Israel because that's how you garner support among Arabs, by attacking the common enemy, which is Israel. But can you explain who's in control and who are the other parties, and what do we have to look out for that in the coming weeks and months? Because I don't think it's all clear cut.
The term "who is in control" is in itself misleading because there is no control.
Okay.
That's again one of the mistakes of the Western media. They jump from one extreme to the other. Bashar Assad was stable leader, and after 2 weeks they already know that the other guy, Julani, he's in control. He's not in control, because first of all, what he has in his command are gangs, organizations that are basically militias, as you said. There's no army anymore. And by the way, what Israel did to the Syrian army was a brilliant
Incredible.
operation. And I give you an historic example, by the way, to all those who criticize Israel. They should learn from a guy called Winston Spencer Churchill, the great one. After France capitulated to Germany, what did he do? He ordered the British Navy to destroy the French Navy in Algeria in order to prevent it from falling to the hands of the Nazis.
I didn't know that.
Because in a war, that's what you do.
Yeah.
That's what you do. So in the absence of a real military and police forces that might be, who knows, loyal to whom, the guy, Julani, that is now making all the statements in Damascus is the current strong man over a territory that is not even well defined. I mean, it's not even clear where exactly his control is, and so on and so forth. So we are going to have troubles there. Because in a situation like the one that you have had in Syria or during the Lebanese civil wars, in the absence of a real sense of collective identity, of collective solidarity, a civil war breaks society in a way that is like atomization of the society. You have local forces, ethnic, regional, religious, or all subgroups raising their heads, and standing now on guard to defend the rights and prevent others from encroaching their territory. So we'll see what happens. I already hear and see reports about executions of Alawis, and some of them are very terrible, but you don't see them in the American press, for example, because now the idea is, let's develop the identity of Julani. He's a nice guy. I want to tell you something. The same happened after 1979 in the Iranian Revolution.
Say the same what? I'm very
The
interested in what
same
you're.
idea that those guys are not that bad. Never mind what they said in the past.
Okay.
Because Khomeini, in the beginning, if you recall, maybe you are too young to recall, but I do, he was surrounded by a group of graduates of American elite universities. So they are nice guys, they are our guys. So very soon you will have some kind of good English speakers who will explain that Julani is a nice guy and is a reformer and change and all that. Don't believe all this. Julani is the disciple of a Sunni Muslim scholar by the name of Ibn Taymiyyah. Now, Ibn Taymiyyah lived way back from 1263 to 1328. Why is he important? Because he is one of the main fathers of Salafist jihadist Islamic doctrines. He influenced the Wahhabis in Saudi Arabia way later after his death. But most importantly, he issued the famous fatwa about the Alawis of Syria that basically defined them as subhumans, because he said they are worse than the infidels.
Okay, I know what you're talking about, but I think probably most people, when you're talking about Alawi, they don't know what you're talking
The
about. Can you
Alawis
repeat?
are this minority of about 15% of the Syrian population that was the backbone of the Assad regime. The Assads are Alawis. They are not Shiis, even though they are recognized as being Shiis for political reasons. They have their own rituals and doctrines, and they are most despised by Sunni Muslims as being heretics, all the way to even blame them for having paganic rituals and all that, a secret religion. And the fatwa of Ibn Taymiyyah for 700 or 800 years back, and people that listen to us or watch us will say, what is he talking about, 700 or 800 years back? They pay attention to it. They pay attention to it. We don't, but they do. So look, the future is not going to be so simple. There will be mayhem, there will be chaos, you know. In the end, there will be a force that will come out and be stronger, you know. I guess the Turks would like to have an involvement in it. Don't rule out still some influences of pro-Iranian elements, because there still are elements that enjoyed from the Iranian presence, you know. In the south of Syria, I believe that Israel should have some kind of informal security zone in cooperation with the Druze population of the south of Syria, which is about 600,000-700,000 people, but well organized and well motivated.
What does that look like? Having a combined defense agreement among the
well,
Jews?
it will look like in actions on the ground rather than formal agreements.
Okay.
And I hope that the Americans will not betray the Kurds like Trump did in 2017 when he betrayed the Kurds of Iraq, that he will prevent the Turks from doing whatever they have in mind of doing to the Kurdish enclave in the northeast. So Syria will be informally, but actually divided according to its ethnic religious components, you know, with a strong Sunni control in the Damascus to Aleppo area. Aleppo and Damascus are not twin cities. They have different orientations. Aleppo always look to the north. Damascus look to the south. Different, you know, even Jews from Aleppo and Damascus would always define themselves as different than each other.
That's true, right.
It's interesting, you know. So that's what's going to happen. And it may be, if you ask me, similar to the chaos that existed in Iran after the revolution.
Except after the revolution in 1979, there weren't all of the multi-ethnic groups. There weren't Sunnis and Kurds.
Yes, but you know, first of all, Iran is
multi-ethnic, but they didn't have militia
they did have some issues with the Kurds. I agree with you. They had some issues with the Azeris, the Azerbaijanis, you know, that are huge minority in Iran, about 20 million people, maybe 18 or so million, you know, it's a big minority. But yeah, you are right. But there were troubles. And there will be troubles in Syria as well. And definitely it will spill over towards Israel, because in order to create troubles for Israel, you don't need to have the Syrian army. The Syrian army doesn't exist anymore. It was destroyed.
Right.
But what you can have are gangs of people that will still put their hands on what's left of the Syrian army and try to attack Israel by, you know, terror activities. They would call it guerrilla, whatever, but terror activities, you know, that can happen. And I believe that, as opposed to what the IDF did not do for a long time, either in South Lebanon or in Gaza, they do now in Syria. They're acting very quickly and very concretely to try and stave it off, to prevent it in advance. So I can only hope it will succeed, you know. But don't delude yourself. Those guys that are now so-called in control in Damascus are not friends, and they are not nice people. People.
So that's what I wanted to ask you. I was with somebody this week who I don't think he has a whole lot of background to make the statement, but he made a statement that he thinks, despite Syria being a failed state, that Syria is going to come along under Trump and become a partner to the Abraham Accords. Is that completely fantasy right now?
First of all, it's a nice fantasy for a change. Look, I don't understand Trump policy to be such that he would be ready to pay the price for including Syria in any agreement, because you will have to put 50 to 100 or maybe $200 billion to rehabilitate and rebuild Syria. I mean, the civil war destroyed a lot of Syria, and this one, so there's no army there. They will have to rebuild the army and all that. By the way, we didn't mention before, so the Russians are having still a foothold, and they are not yet totally out of Syria. And who can send them out of Syria? I mean, have to do it, or else they do it by themselves. They are not going to do it by themselves just like that,
Correct.
So there are going to be troubles. And of course, if Trump will be a wizard and a magician, I don't know what, and will bring Syria to the Abraham Accords, I will be happy to tell you I was wrong, but I don't see it happening.
So let me rewind. I wasn't even gonna go this direction. In the 1990s, when you were involved with negotiations with Syria, did you actually think that we could have peace then
No,
under Hafez Assad?
no. Look, what happened was Hafez Assad was a clever fellow. I'm sorry. And he understood 89, 90, the collapse of the Soviet Union changed everything for him. Egypt was in peace with Israel. Then Saddam Hussein took the Iraqi army and invaded Kuwait. So Assad realized that the overall regional configuration was moving against him, and his readiness to get into negotiations with us was not in order to achieve peace. That wasn't on his agenda. By the way, it wasn't an agenda of Prime Minister Shamir. And retroactively, you can say how right he was, Shamir, because see what happened in Syria.
Correct.
The agenda for Assad was negotiations for the sake of negotiations in order to gain goodwill from the Americans.
I see.
That was the idea. Well, our negotiations, when I participated under the Likud government at that time, were futile, and then the Rabin government, the late Rabin government, decided to have negotiations, and they did, and it seemed like auto it's going to happen. It's not. Look, in 2000, few months before he died, Assad, he was almost half dead already by then. He was known to be a dead kind of living guy,
Okay.
He went to Geneva to meet with Clinton. He, by the way, never accepted to go to America. It was like, oh, I don't go to America. I mean, it's interesting. He went to Geneva to meet Clinton. And it was the last desperate attempt by Clinton to make peace, and Assad, of course, said no. A few months later, he died, But he said no when he was already offered 99.8 or 9 of the Golan Heights. Even that he refused. And, Netanyahu, Prime Minister Netanyahu denies now, but he was involved also in negotiations 98, 99 with the Syrians that were mediated by a very important American Jewish leader, never mind the name. And the idea was also giving up almost everything in the Golan Heights, and Assad refused. Because Assad, at that time, his mind was already about something else altogether, to prepare his son Bashar to take over. It was a big question of Israeli intelligence in the 1990s. When will Assad die? Everybody knew he's going to die. The question is when. It's like if you know about the Spanish history, when Franco, in his last years, the dictator, everybody says, when is he going to die? Because then things will change. And he finally died. So the same happened with Hafez Assad. He died 3 months or so after the meeting with Clinton in Geneva. And then, of course, came Bashar Assad. And I had a debate at that time. Somebody said, it's a new generation, the new king in Morocco, more or less at that time, young guy,
Right.
the current one, King Abdullah of Jordan, speaks good English, he's half English even, his mother is English.
Yeah.
And now Bashar Assad, the reformer and all that. And who knows, I mean, we are on the verge of great period and so on and so forth. And nothing happened. At that time, a year later came 9/11. But look, Bashar Assad, in the end of the day, was a tribal leader. He was a leader that his first mission, like his father's, was first of all to make sure that our people, the Alawis, will not be genocided. When you watch videos about the Syrian civil war from, say, 10 years back or 8 years back, and you see how Alawis were interviewed, they talked like that. They said, those guys look at us like we are vermin, the Sunnis, like we are subhumans. And it is either us, we, or them, either us or them, you know. And Bashar Assad, with all this Western education, command of English, and appearance, and the wife, and so on and so forth, he basically knew that in order to survive in Syria, he needs to be an ally with Iran. And that was
there was
his
no more Soviet Union and the Russians.
that was his insurance, health
I see.
insurance, policy insurance, if you will, you know, security insurance. And whenever there were talks with Syria, there was always a question that people like us ask behind closed doors. So how can you make peace with Syria if he rules over a country representing a minority, a bloody dictator, a terrible dictator? I mean, you know, how can you do something like that? And, you know, the answer was given by him and his father. They were afraid to do it because they understood that they don't have the real mandate from their people to do that. And they wanted to defend, first of all, their own community. The tragedy is now, or the irony, if you will, that now with Assad gone, you don't like to be an Alawi in Syria today. Trust me,
No,
you do
there's no
not want to be
protection for them.
trust me, you do not want to be an Alawi in Syria.
Which has two components. It has the component, what you're saying, the fatwa from 800 years ago, and
Yeah.
and that they're looked upon as subhuman. But it also has to do with the fact that for almost 60 years, Alawis have controlled Syria, and not just controlled Syria, but ruthlessly against Sunnis and others. So the fact that that they have this social status that they do just means that everyone else wants to exact their revenge.
Well, there will be troubles. Look, I remember 2012 or so, a few months after the beginning of the civil war in Syria, I met a Syrian opposition activist in DC. I was asked to meet with him. We had lunch, you know, and so he told me, you know, I served in a battalion, whatever, in the Syrian army. So most of the soldiers were Sunni Muslims like me, but I remember the numbers even, 106 out of 115 officers were Alawi. So you understand, of course, I mean, the ordinary Sunni soldier did not think that he needs to sacrifice their lives in order to save Bashar Assad. But those Alawis who did it for him, look, the Alawi community decimated in the civil war. Young people died. I mean, the soldiers, you know, the core of the Syrian army, they paid the price in the civil war and all that, you know. And now you read, I guess you also read in the Israeli press the descriptions of the Israeli soldiers in what used to be Syrian positions, Syrian camps along the border, all looked like terrible shape. I mean, everything was rotten, everything was obsolete, everything
Yeah.
was useless, and so on and so forth. By the way, the same stories you heard about Russia after the initial failures in Ukraine war, and all of a sudden experts told you, you know what, we are not surprised because that's what we thought about the Russian army.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Let's take another quick break, and I want to come back and begin to look forward. What do we need to be looking in the weeks, months, and year to come? 1 minute. Okay, Dr. Olmert, amazing. So what do we need to look for? You've got all of these groups. Iran doesn't want to lose its complete influence. Russia doesn't. Turkey seems to be coming out as a winner. Actually, I have a question before you answer that. Before we talk about big picture, Turkey as a member of NATO, if it attacks U.S. troops in or other NATO troops in Syria, is that a violation of NATO terms? It always
Yes,
puzzles
it
me.
is, but they will not do it. Look, Erdogan is it's very careful, you know, he's very clever. That's why he's so dangerous, because, you know, we look at dictators, they're dictators, and we kind of, you know, he's a smart fellow, and he's not going to fight American troops in Syria. That's why I said before, the Americans will it's their responsibility to take care of the Kurds, to prevent the Turks from genociding the Kurds and taking over their territory in Syria. They should prevent it. They should help the Kurds. The
They
Kurds
should,
will
but
die.
you don't necessarily believe that it will
No,
happen.
look, the isolationist voices coming out from the Trump entourage are very worrisome to me.
Yes.
Very worrisome to me, and I know that everybody is expecting to who knows what will happen with Trump with regard to Israel, but you know what? Yes, definitely going to be far friendlier on many accounts, many levels, and so on. But the sense of isolationism, the sense of, leave us alone, basically, it's not our business, is worrisome. And we have to watch it. So you asked me about the future. Look,
Yes. Okay, good.
you of course want to know about Israel. No, my opinion is just a private opinion, but I think it is not a minority opinion necessarily. Look, the question for Israel is very simple. Okay, we are winning. Israel is winning. It's a tremendous achievement. Hamas is defeated. Hezbollah is defeated, at least for the time being. And now Syrian army is a story of the past. And Iran is much weaker.
Yeah.
So what is really the strategic end game for us? It is what it has been for years, the Iranian nuclear program.
Okay.
That's the end game.
So everything else, Turkey taking over.
Everything else is
Sunnis,
important.
Druze, Kurds.
This one is existential.
Okay.
That's how I build it. So look, that's a political decision that is also, of course, in the first place, it's also a military strategic decision. And that depends a lot on the American administration, the new one, on Trump. The voices coming from him are confusing. On the one hand, I'm ready to do whatever. I'm ready to negotiate. On the other hand, I think he said today, whenever we are talking at the time, that all the options are on the table about war with Iran. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. From an Israeli perspective, look, Iran tried to build what they call the Shia Crescent.
Yes.
Israel has broken it. Israel did something huge for the Western world. Forget about ourselves, but Western world. But, there's anti-Semitism. You heard about that, of course, and people are, we need to decide on priorities. And the number one priority is Iran nuclear program. Syria is a tactical situation now. The same Hezbollah and Hamas. Iran continues to be the strategic overall threat.
Okay.
It still is the presence of the Houthis in Yemen, which on occasion send a missile or so, and that should be dealt with as well. But that's again tactical.
Yes.
So what Israel will do about Iran, with or without the US, will have repercussions about Syria and Lebanon, because without the Iranian support, Hezbollah is dead.
Yes.
But then, just to make it more complicated, if Iran is dead, who would be in Syria? That will open up for the Turks. So it's a very delicate balance here.
So wait, are you suggesting that we need Syria to still have some sort of Iranian influence so it can bounce?
All I'm suggesting is that the options are not good and better.
Okay.
They are bad and worse.
Well, someone asked me
They are
recently.
reasonable and bad. They are not good and great.
So someone asked me recently who we should be supporting in this revive revolution that was taking place, and my response was they should all be successful in terms of killing one another.
Well, yeah, I mean, remember when there was the Iraq-Iran war, the then Israeli chief of staff, General Raful Eitan said, every day that passes is a great day. I mean, they do what otherwise we should have done, and they do it for themselves. Look, by the way, the Iranians are a key player here, because if they really decide that they still want to invest in Iraq, they are still there, and through Iraq in Syria, that's a part between them and Turkey, not between them and us.
Ah, okay.
That's between them and Turkey. If on the other hand, the Iranians decide we leave Syria and we leave, we are not there anymore. We lost. I mean, the investment is lost in Lebanon. What can we do? They might intensify the nuclear program exactly because they would feel vulnerable. So it comes back to what I told you. Strategically, existentially, the Iranian nuclear program is the number one priority. But that's an opinion.
Well, that's not an opinion. It's a factual statement because there has never been and there is not an existential threat against the state of Israel. We may have thought that that was 1967. There could have been, but that was miraculous and we won. But there's never been this existential threat. And if and they could have a nuclear weapon by the time Trump is inaugurated.
But that's exactly the point. You see, that's exactly the point. That's they all the key, not the key, not only them, all the keys, but they all the big key, an important key. And we'll see what they do. If they decide to cut their losses and leave Syria and Lebanon, they failed. There will be troubles within the regime there. That's another story because of,
Okay.
settling scores between people and factions. But it could still lead them to intensify the nuclear program because they will feel more vulnerable, as I said. So we have to be very careful here, and we have to understand that in a situation like that, you have levels of dangers. And we have
Okay.
to
So
decide
at
on
what
what
point?
is more and what is less, and in what time we can deal with the more as opposed to the less.
Okay, so good. Now, Tachlis, what bottom line? At what point does Israel need to act the same way we just acted by just essentially destroying the Syrian military against the Iranian nuclear facilities?
Yesterday, today, tomorrow, 21st of January, nothing will happen without coordinating it with the Americans. I mean, let's be honest about that. I mean, no Israeli
Okay.
government of responsibility will do something like this without at least getting a sense of what the American reaction would be. I don't know what's going on behind closed doors now. I'll be surprised if this is the number one topic because the immediate situations are always surpassing, the more
Yes.
strategic issues. But Iran today is in a very, very low and weak point. And that's, by the way, why I didn't like the way the ceasefire was done with Hezbollah, because it was done at a time when Hezbollah was almost on the ropes, a little bit more,
Yeah.
and they would be totally there. Okay, but that's spilled milk now. Some would say spilled blood, of course, it's more important. The question about Iran is not to be measured in months, in many months. It should be measured in weeks or few months. The
Okay.
time is coming for this crucial decision.
Okay. Hopefully there will be.
Well, hopefully there will be. Hopefully it will be a successful
Also,
decision. Hopefully it will be a victory. But look, we talk here about situations that could be so. You know what they say about war. You know how you start, you never know how you end it.
we never that well, this is true, but one of the unique things which has not happened in Lebanon yet in terms of the defeat of Hezbollah, hopefully with a strong enough military defeat of the Iranian regime, the nuclear weapons, the IRGC, maybe a dead Ayatollah or two, hopefully the Iranian people will rise up as they've been trying to do and be the
That,
other part of that.
that is always a possibility. That is always a possibility. But again, this regime is hated by many Iranians, but liked by many others also. I mean, it's not, regimes like this have their own support, even though it may be smaller than what it used to be or what they
Yeah.
claim it to be, because there are those who enjoy from the regime. There are those who benefit from it. And by the
Well,
way, there were those who benefited from the Assad regime, and not just Alawists, business people in the Aleppo or in Damascus that enjoyed the corruption of the regime, and were part
sure.
of it and all that. So, all this remains to be seen. But coming back to Iran, the point has to be made. Look, in a situation like Israel is in, you have to decide on what is more, what is less dangerous. And the Iranian plan was that if Israel or the US and Israel, or only the US or only Israel, are about to attack us, we have Hezbollah and Hamas and the Syrians and the Iraqis and the Yemenis all converging on America and Israel, and this is fantasy now.
Yes.
All I hear about Iraq, for example, is very interesting. Many Iraqi Shiis say, you know what, we don't want to suffer. You want to fight the Iranians, do it by yourself. We are not part of it. It's interesting. It's
Interesting.
interesting. Yeah, there are voices like this and very strong voices. So it just shows to you, Iran is the head.
Yes.
You cut the head or what?
You
That's
have
it.
to cut the head, and it's the head of the octopus, and people know this. They learned it in third and fourth grade that an octopus can regenerate its tentacles. So the longer we allow the head to continue to exist, Hezbollah can come back, and something worse
Hezbollah
can.
will try to come back, but if Iran is defeated, Hezbollah can't
That's the
come
point.
back.
Can't come back. Correct.
Hezbollah is the baby of Iran.
Correct.
It
And then maybe, and
affects
then right,
genuine issues in Lebanon, but without Iran support, it would have been yet another organization. Now they are
correct.
monster. They've become monster because of Iran.
Right. Okay. Fascinating how the conversation and not surprising begins with Syria and ends in Iran. But I want to come, okay, but that's where we are. And it's important. It's an important lesson in our class today. But I want to come back to Syria for one thing. I remember it as a young man. You, of course, were a little bit older and much more connected. But it's not. I don't know if you remember. I don't know how old you are and what your memory is. But we can't think of Syria and not think of Eli Cohen,
Yeah, yeah.
our spy, who was hung in 1965, and whose body we don't know where. Do you think that this offers us an opportunity to somehow find his body and bring his body home?
The word is somehow. That's a delicate. I don't want to get into this in details for all kinds of reasons.
Okay.
If his bones will be brought back to Israel, it will be my happiest day in life. That I can tell you. I became a Syrian so-called expert specialist. Let others decide if I am, because of the Eli Cohen story of 1965. I was fascinated as a child. As a kid, I was 15. So now you know how old I
Oh,
am.
you remember? Okay, you do
Yeah,
remember.
and I remember everything. And that really attracted me to Syria, and I became fascinated with all that. Uh, it's a tragic story, and sometimes stories are becoming more tragic because they really do not have an end.
Hmm.
That could be the case here, and I'm afraid it is going to be, but I hope I'll be so happy to be wrong. I'll
Okay.
be ecstatically happy to be wrong. But it could still be a story without an end.
Yeah. Yeah. But is this the best opportunity now with this
Uh,
change that
maybe,
maybe
yeah,
there could
I
be
don't know if there were other, look, the question is a bit problematic, pardon me for saying so, because if it says today is the best opportunity, it's like until now there were no opportunities. The question, what is
okay.
opportunity?
Okay.
Opportunity in a situation like this is a combination of factors. One of them is knowledge. The other one is ability.
Okay.
If you don't have the knowledge, doesn't matter the ability. If you have the
Doesn't
ability,
matter. Correct.
so I don't think that at any given time there was definite knowledge coinciding with definite ability.
Okay. Excellent.
And I still don't know if today there might be the knowledge, even though the ability may exist.
Okay.
That's how I put it to you.
Okay. Okay. And I neglected for people who are following who may not know the story. First of all, you have to come to Israel and come visit on the Golan, and we'll talk about Eli Cohen. But his story was made famous in the book Our Man in Damascus, which is still available in print, and Netflix did a four-part series that was a good story. It wasn't necessarily 100% accurate. I forget what that series was called, but definitely a worthwhile story of Eli Cohen, one of Israel's greatest spies, who was caught in Damascus and hung, and whose body we still hope to get back. Dr. Olmert, before we conclude, we've got covered a large range of territory in this class, and a semester's worth.
Mhm.
What did we not cover that people need to know? What's happening this week, next week, and what did we miss?
Well, no, just to mention, because we talk to a Christian audience, that there is a Christian minority in Syria that
Good.
dwindled in numbers. there still was, and there still is, a small community of Aramaic speakers in Syria. One of the two languages is Jesus Christ, the other one was Hebrew, of course. And they are in between the Amer and the Anzevir. The traditional enemies of the Christians in Syria were not the other minorities, it were the Sunni Muslims.
Yeah.
Big massacre in Damascus in 1861 was by Muslims, Sunni Muslims.
Oh,
Yes, yeah.
okay.
And Bashar Assad, by the way, had support of Christians because he tried to create an alliance of all the minorities to shore up, more support to his regime. And the founder of the Baas Party was himself Christian, Michel Aflaq, was the Orthodox Christian. So I think that our Christian audience need also to be aware of the fact that there might be troubles with the Christians now, and that should be one more reason to expect the Trump administration, or even to put pressure on them, not to run away from Syria, but to be very much on the watch of what's happening over there, because among other problems, there could be troubles also to the Christians that are still there. The numbers used to be about 10% of the population. I think it dwindled to maybe 5 or 6%, which might still be over 1 million.
Yeah.
It's a large minority, large group, and we have to pay attention to that.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah.
Dr. Josef Olmert, well, always a delight. I love that we're in touch a little bit on social media and following you, and some worth following me in all of your social media. I'll
Thank
put
you.
your links in the show notes for this. I want to thank you so much for taking time. It's late there tonight, and I'm very grateful for you taking the time.
Thank you very much, and continue doing the good job. Take
Thank
care.
you so
And
much.
happy Hanukkah and happy New Year and Merry Christmas.
Amen.
Take care.
As we always say at the end, if you stay with us this late, you deserve a reward. And we've been offering for the last number of years a great gift we call it From Jonathan's Bookshelf. I'm not actually sitting in my office today looking at my books, but a little over a year ago, just before the war began, we started offering a unique gift that all we ask you to do to be eligible to receive this gift is share, comment, or like the link to this program, and we will enter you for a drawing in our magnificent book, Israel the Miracle, that came out just before the war began in September of 2023. So please do share, comment, and like this program. We're always grateful that this podcast is sponsored by our friends at the Willow Run Greenhouse in Culpeper, Virginia. If you're ever in the area, pop in and thank them for helping make conversations like this possible. And also special thanks to the Coin family for their meaningful sponsorship. Inspiration from Zion and all the Genesis 123 Foundation programs are made possible by donations. So please consider joining us to help continue the dialogue and build bridges. And if you'd like to sponsor a future episode of Inspiration from Zion in honor or memory of a loved one or a special occasion, or maybe your favorite Tel Aviv University college professor, please be in touch at inspirationfromzion@gmail.com. We love to hear your comments always as part of a dialogue, and invite you to send any questions as well, especially questions you have about traditional Judaism for our Ask the Rabbi programs. Please share this with others who also find it of interest, and continue to join us right here as we bring you more meaningful conversations about unique topics relating to Israel that you won't hear anywhere else. Wherever you are in the world, I pray that you and your loved ones are all safe and healthy, and I send my blessings from right here in the Judean mountains. God bless you.